I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode number 179, Vulnerability. Hello, my lady. If you have a spouse that is struggling with a pornography problem, then you are in the right place. My name is Jolene Wynn, and I am a life coach, a member of the LDS faith, and the wife of a former porn addict. And in this podcast, I am going to teach you how to change the way that you are affected by your husband's choices. We can't change him, but what we can do is change the way that you respond when he makes the decisions that he does. I'm going to teach you how to manage your brain, how to process all of the emotions that seem so overwhelming to you so that you can finally live a life where you aren't living in fear of triggers and relapses. And by learning how to manage your mind and process your emotions, you are no longer going to be running on an emotional roller coaster, but you are going to start feeling so much more in control of your life no matter what your husband is doing. And I'm going to teach you all of that on this podcast. I can't wait to get started with you, and I'm so glad that you are here. I promise you, you're in the right place. Good morning, my ladies. How are you? Happy Monday. I am so excited about this week. This week is my in-person retreat. I am so excited. So on Thursday, I will be taking all of these ladies. I'll be meeting them at the beach in North Carolina. We have this beautiful private beach house that is several stories. We have our own private pool that's heated. We have beach access, and we have no children and no husbands. And I have so much to teach, and I have just been working on creating space to be able to help these women transform in whatever capacity they need. That's the coolest thing I think about coaching, is that it's not about getting any one result. It's about helping every person get the result that they need. And that's what I think is so powerful and so beautiful and so amazing about coaching, is all of these tools help each person individually exactly where they are. And I cannot wait to spend 3 days with these women. My sister is coming, my photographer's coming. I have my friend coming who she's going to be running social media while I'm there and taking video clips to hopefully share them on Instagram with y'all so that you guys can get a little taste of what's going on while we're there. But I'm just so excited to just dive in and give these women that are coming all of my attention, all of my power, my energy, and for them to have the opportunity to experience one another in the same place. There's something just so powerful and healing and about being in a group of women who get it, who support you, and to be able to create connections that are really just impossible otherwise. So I was talking to my husband this weekend. He said, "Are you going to do this again next year?" And I said, "Yes." And because it's not for me, it's for the women that come. It's for you guys. It's for the ones who decide to take that step and meet in person. There's, again, something so powerful that cannot be replicated online. You cannot replace human interaction with virtual interaction. And I am just so excited to have this opportunity to meet these women this week. It's going to be amazing. So that is fun, and that's coming up. Another thing that's coming up, though, for those of you who can't come to the retreat, I am teaching a brand new class on October 30th at 11 a.m. Eastern. I am teaching a new class called How to Reconnect with Your Spouse After Betrayal Trauma. If you are struggling, if you're feeling disconnected from your spouse, if you're trying to recreate a connection, if you're feeling you're like, I am trying really hard to connect with my husband, I'm trying really hard to reestablish a relationship with him, and it's just not working, this is for you. You can go to my website, jolenewynn.com /Coach Week, and you will be able to sign up for free. This is, again, a free class that I'm doing, again, on October 30th at 11 a.m. Eastern. If you can't come live, then go ahead and sign up, because you will get access to the replay, but you will need to sign up in order to have access to it. So, again, that's going to be in just a few weeks. I'm going to be teaching how to reconnect to your spouse. And even if you're sitting here, I had someone comment and they were like, I have no desire to reconnect with my spouse. Totally fine. If you have no desire to reconnect with your spouse, you can still come. I would still love to have you. I'd love to actually coach you and talk to you about why, and let's figure out what's going on underneath and discover that as well. So if you just want to get a little taste of what coaching is like, or if this topic in particular speaks to you, again, go to my website, joleneWynn.com, go to the Coach Week tab. You'll be able to find all the details and you'll be able to sign up for free. Okay, ladies, I have one more thing before we dive in today, but it kind of goes into it, is I've decided not to grow out my side shave. And I know that you're like, why do we even care about your hair problems, Jolene? Nobody cares. But here's what I wanted to share with you guys was a revelation that I had last night when I was talking to my husband. So a few weeks ago, about a month ago, I was feeling really antsy about my hair. And this hasn't happened since I shaved my head 4 years ago. And so it was fascinating. And I just was feeling really antsy and I didn't know why. And I thought, okay, I just want to change my hair. And so I took out my dreadlocks and we put in my extensions, but then they were getting all tangled and knotted and I didn't like that. And I was like, let's put my dreadlocks back in. So I put my dreadlocks back in and I was like, that's not it either. And I was like, oh, maybe I just need to grow out my side shave. And so I bought all these wigs, and if you follow me on Instagram, you know I've been wearing them. Today I'm wearing my pink one. It's my favorite. And I was talking to my husband last night and talking to him about my hair. And because here's the thing, is it has been driving me insane. Growing out my side shave has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And I've done some hard things in my life. This one is easily the hardest. And I figured out why. And really the reason why was because I didn't know why I was doing it. And my husband kept asking me that. He's like, why are you growing out your side shave? And I was like, I don't really know. And that was my answer. And it was true. I didn't really know. And so we started looking at that last night. And my husband was so sweet and wonderful and kind of helped me coach through it, or just gave me the opportunity to take a look inward myself. And what I realized what was coming up for me was that I was really worried about my husband finding me attractive. With everything that we've been going through the last year and him being attracted to other women and all of the things that we've been working through, what was coming up for me was this idea that my husband doesn't find me as attractive. And I was just really worried about that. But this was all subconscious. I had no idea. And so what that was coming out in was me saying, okay, maybe the reason that my husband was attracted to all of these other women was because he doesn't find my hair attractive, me attractive. And yet logically, I know that that's incorrect. Logically, I can sit here and say, I know my husband is attracted to me. He always has been. He's so wonderful. And yet emotionally, this is the emotional response that I had. So when I let my brain get out of the way and I just acknowledged the emotions I was feeling unattractive. I was feeling a little insecure. And when I allowed myself to sit and process that, and then my husband and I talked about it last night, what came up was what I realized was that I want my side shave. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. I love it. And I am okay with it. And I am okay. And my husband actually likes my side shave. He does not prefer my dreadlocks. That's okay. My mom hates them. Rob doesn't hate them, but he prefers just when I have extensions, when my hair is just long, right? And just regular hair, not when I put the dreadlocks in. And all of that was coming up for me was just all of my own insecurities and all of the things that I wasn't allowing myself to process and feel a month ago when I started feeling really antsy. What I did instead was try to solve it by what was going on outside of me, which was changing my hair, okay? Buying all the wigs. So what I just wanted to bring that up and offer that to y'all because it was just a good example to me. This happens all the time. We have internal emotional turmoil, drama, trauma, whatever you want to call it. It's all in there. And when we don't recognize it and when we don't take the time to sit and look at it and process it, we start reacting to it, hoping that we change our situation, our circumstances in such a way that it will make ourselves feel better. And sometimes it can temporarily, okay? Sometimes it can just put a little Band-Aid on, but eventually, give it a month, give it a week, give it a day, it's going to come back up, okay? So even though putting on some wigs for a month made me feel better, a month later, it's still under there, okay? It hasn't gone anywhere. And it's until I sat and I looked at it and processed it and acknowledged it, and I let go of the judgment, because then, of course, part of my brain wanted to judge myself and say, Why is this coming up now? Almost a year later. This makes no sense. Rob is now past this. Why is this insecurity coming up now? And I wanted to judge it, and I had to let all of that judgment go and just acknowledge that this is how I was feeling, even though it made no logical sense. Stop trying to talk myself out of it and just process the emotional piece of it. And when I did that, that's when I was able to actually discover what it is that I wanted to do, why, and make sure I like my reasons. And that is so powerful. And this is what enables you to feel so much more in control of your life. And I know that my hair is like a really simple example, but it is those simple examples that compound to make up our life. The clothes we wear, how we do our hair, the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis. Do I go on this trip? Do I not? Do I go back to school? Do I not? Do I talk to my husband about this? Do I not? Do I bring this up with my kids? Do I not? All of those little decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis are all being run by subconscious thoughts. And when we aren't aware of those, that's when we feel out of control. So when you have something in your life that you're feeling uneasy or antsy about, then I want to offer that you take a look at it, because it's probably just being run by some subconscious emotions that just need to be processed. And that leads me into today's topic, because it can be a very vulnerable experience. And today I really want to encourage you guys to listen to this episode over and over and over and over, okay? Because I'm hoping it'll be really powerful for you. One of the main emotions that I hear women say is, I feel vulnerable. I feel vulnerable when my husband is struggling with pornography. It makes me feel vulnerable. And that's what I want to talk about today. Let's talk about what vulnerable is. Okay? The definition of vulnerable is susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. Now, we're not talking about physical attack here. We're talking about emotional. When we feel emotionally vulnerable, then what we really mean is that we feel like we could get hurt. And this is why this is such a prominent emotion that we feel with our husband's pornography problem, is because so much negative emotion came up when we found out about it, or when he relapsed, or whatever it was, that we feel more vulnerable than we did before. We feel more susceptible to emotional harm. And our brain is wired to avoid harm. Okay, our brain is wired to avoid pain. That is a beautiful thing that our brain is designed to do. It keeps us alive for a really long time. The problem is that your brain doesn't know the difference between emotional harm and physical harm. Okay, so your brain can't tell between physical pain and emotional pain. So what it does is it tries to avoid emotional pain by avoiding the circumstance that it thinks that created it. Now, the problem with this is that when you are married to the circumstance, then your brain wants to avoid that person. Your brain wants to avoid your spouse. Your brain wants to avoid the person it thinks creates your feelings. Okay? Now, as you guys know, you've been listening to this podcast for a while, your brain doesn't know that your thoughts are what create your feelings. Your primitive brain thinks that your circumstance creates your feelings. It's not true. Your thoughts create your feelings, but your brain wants to solve it. Your brain thinks, you know what's easier than feeling our feelings? It's actually just changing our situation. So we can either get divorced, we can separate, or we can just build up some walls. Because maybe we don't want to get divorced, maybe we don't want to separate, but what we don't want to do is get hurt. What we don't want to do is keep feeling vulnerable. We don't want to feel susceptible to more emotional pain. So let's just build up some walls. Let's just pretend that we're fine, but keep our husband at arm's length. Let's just pretend that everything's good and we'll just power through. And that's the response that I see most often, is we have all of these barriers or these walls that we've slowly built over time that are trying to protect us from feeling vulnerable. The problem with this is that feeling vulnerable is an emotion. And it's created by our thoughts. And if that's true, then it's internally generated. So it doesn't matter how many walls you build between yourself and your spouse. What your brain is trying to protect you from is already inside of you. And you can't protect yourself from your feelings. And when you try, what you unintentionally end up doing is creating walls where your husband is kept out, and all of those emotions that you are trying to pretend don't exist, that you're trying to protect yourself from, are actually on the side of the wall that you are. So you're just blocking them inside with you. You're like locking them in with you rather than allowing them to process and release and let go. Now, our primitive brain doesn't understand this. The primitive brain that is wired to protect us from pain doesn't understand this. This is why it's so crucial to learn how to manage your brain and use your prefrontal cortex, that beautiful brain that God gave you. You are in charge of it. And you use your prefrontal cortex, you take conscious decisions, conscious effort to manage your brain and then process that emotion. Because vulnerability, ladies, vulnerable is just an emotion. If you feel vulnerable, it means you feel like you might get hurt. And that is just a feeling. And a feeling is simply a vibration inside your body. Every feeling that we feel feels different. Vulnerable, that emotion is very difficult to feel because we resist that emotion a lot. Our primitive brain doesn't want us to feel that because it's afraid that then it will be true. If I allow myself to feel like I might get hurt, then it probably means that I will. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so that's what vulnerable is. Vulnerable is an emotion that you feel where you feel susceptible to emotional harm. Okay, now let's talk about vulnerability. If vulnerable means that you are susceptible to harm, to emotional harm, because that's what we're talking about today, vulnerability is your ability to feel susceptible to emotional harm. Okay, should I say that again? If vulnerable is susceptible to emotional harm, then vulnerability is your ability to feel susceptible to emotional harm. Okay, it's so powerful when you take it and you break it apart. Vulnerability, okay? Your ability to feel negative emotion. The more vulnerable we feel, the more vulnerability we allow ourselves, the more we open up or make ourselves susceptible to negative emotion or emotional harm. The beautiful part about this is that when you make yourself more vulnerable, when you increase your vulnerability, what you end up doing is also increasing the opportunity for more positive emotion. Our brain thinks that if we open up to more negative emotion, that's the only thing that's going to happen. It's just we're going to have a huge influx, this huge flood of negative emotion just come pouring in. But that's not what happens. It's impossible to only open up to negative emotion in the same way that it's impossible to only close off negative emotion. It's one of the biggest mistakes that we make. When we feel vulnerable, what we end up doing is we build those walls and we want to close off the negative emotion. Number one, the problem with that is that we are actually closing ourselves in with our negative emotion since we are the cause or the creation of it. But what we unintentionally end up doing also is unintentionally closing ourselves off from positive emotion. When we build up walls and we keep ourselves at arm's length from our spouse, not only do we prevent ourselves from feeling, all the negative emotion, which is not true, we also don't give ourselves the opportunity to have positive emotion. We can't create connection. We can't feel love. We can't feel all of those beautiful emotions that are positive because we've closed ourselves off with this wall, right? You cannot only close off negative emotion. You end up closing off positive emotion as well, okay? That is the same in reverse. When you open yourself up to more negative emotion, to the potential for negative emotion, right? Vulnerability. When you increase your vulnerability, when you open up to the potential for more negative emotion, you also open up to the potential for more positive emotion. Okay? You get to open up to both. You get to expand your capacity to feel. This is something I work with my clients on a lot, and I'm so proud of them because what it really enables you to do is to experience life to the fullest, because you are not hiding from your feelings. You are not hiding or blocking yourself off from feeling emotion. And that's what we tend to do. Again, our primitive brain is wired to avoid this. So this is when you get to be in charge of your brain. One of the biggest examples that I see of this is in physical intimacy. And I've talked about this a ton. Physical intimacy can feel doubly vulnerable because not only are we emotionally vulnerable, we are also physically vulnerable at that time. So our brain is just going nuts with the idea, with the feeling that we are very vulnerable right now, right? Well, not only emotionally, because we're having this connection that's we don't have with anybody else but our spouse, but also physically. We are physically very exposed, very vulnerable, okay? And our brain is very aware of that, okay? So that is one of the reasons why I see so many women when their husbands struggle with pornography is they tend to pull back. They have a hard time even experiencing or enjoying physical intimacy because it brings up so much vulnerability inside them. They feel so vulnerable that they want to avoid it. So they don't engage, they don't offer it, they don't initiate, and they have a hard time even responding if their husband initiates physical intimacy because it makes them feel so vulnerable and that their primitive brain is running the show so much here that they don't know how to override that and just experience the feeling and do it anyway, if they want to. So one of the things I coach so much with my clients on, and they make so much progress, is their willingness to increase the feeling of vulnerable inside of them. What if you were just willing to feel it? For all of you who that scenario resonates, where you struggle because you feel so vulnerable in physical intimacy with your spouse, or maybe it's not even physical intimacy, but maybe it's in sharing your thoughts and feelings, right? You feel so emotionally vulnerable that you tend to just not, and you pull back, but now you're distant from your spouse, and now you're not even talking, and now you feel like you guys are just roommates. All of that, what if you were willing to increase your ability to feel susceptible to emotional pain? Again, it's just a feeling. And if you know how to process your feelings, then it's not something you have to be afraid of and not something that you have to avoid. But this is a skill that requires some practice, right? And it can be so scary. And everything inside of you is screaming to not do it. Every primitive reaction, your fight or flight kicks in, and instead it just wants to pick a fight, or it wants to shut down or sleep in the other room or kick him out. That's what our fight or flight wants to do in these moments. Our primitive brain wants to take over and say, no, this is scary. Let's not do this. This is when it's so important to say, how do I actually want to show up here? Am I willing to put myself in a position where I feel vulnerable, where I'm willing to feel rejection? Am I willing to initiate physical intimacy and feel rejection as a potential? Because I also, as a potential, have the potential for more connection. Right? If I'm willing to initiate, this is such a good example. You're vulnerable, right? Okay, here I am. I'm going to show up. I'm willing to initiate physical intimacy, knowing that there's two options. He could say yes or he could say no. One, if he says no, I could feel rejection. So there's the vulnerability, right? Am I increasing my potential for negative emotion? Yes. However, I'm at the same time also increasing my potential for positive because he could say yes. And if he does, then it could be a beautiful experience where we feel more connected, where we feel more engaged, where we feel more at one with one another than we had previously. Right? Are you guys with me? So this is such a beautiful example of being vulnerable, right? And again, being vulnerable simply means that you feel, it's just an emotion, susceptible to negative emotion, emotional harm, negative emotion, any negative emotion. Okay. And when you are willing to increase your vulnerability, when you are willing to increase your ability to open up to the potential for negative emotion, that's when you also open up to the potential for more positive emotion. If you want more positive emotion in your life, the secret is increasing your vulnerability. is increasing your ability to open up to negative emotion. Because when you are willing to open up to negative emotion, and you know that the worst thing that can happen is that you'll feel a feeling, and you know how to feel your feelings, when you know how to process those feelings, when you know how to feel those emotions, then there's nothing you can't do. And this is what gives you the confidence to say, I know that my husband's pornography problem might never go away, but I also know that I will be okay no matter what. Because the worst thing that can happen is I will feel a negative emotion, and I know how to feel those, and I can just feel it. That is the power of vulnerability, and that's what I want to offer to all of you. If you guys want help with this, you can come. I will coach you through this. This is why I work with my clients one-on-one on emotional processing. It's such a vital, powerful skill. And if you want help with that, I would love to help you. I meant to mention this earlier at the beginning of the podcast episode, but my program is open. I'm not closing and opening the doors. That was not right for me. That was not right for you. It was not right for my business. So the doors are open. They always are. You can always go to my website and sign up, get lifetime access, and start going right away. Because this is the beauty, this is the power of changing your life, is that it's possible and it's all internal. So stop closing yourself off to your husband, because what you're really doing is just locking those negative emotions within you. And if you want help, again, this is something we're going to be going over in that How to Reconnect with Your Spouse webinar that I'm doing in just a couple weeks on October 30th, and you can sign up for that as well. I love you, ladies. I hope you guys have a beautiful week. I can't wait to see those of you who are coming to the in-person retreat. I'll see you on Thursday. And for the rest of you, I will see you guys next week. So take care. All right, ladies, it's time to rise up and take charge of your healing. And I have the best way for you to do it. I have created a lifetime access coaching program that I have designed specifically for you and exactly what you're going through right now. This is where I help you develop a personal mastery of all the tools that you're learning here on the podcast in order for you to create a permanent change. Go to my website, joleneWynn.com. You will find all the information there, and you can sign up today, and we will start going forward. I can't wait to see you there.